taste just as good, and then you didn't have any salt. So salt, you're not supposed to eat very much at all. So 1 teaspoon per day. So that's about this much at all, okay? But like sugar, salt is hiding in everything that we eat. So we're going to play the same thing with how much salt. So I have some soy sauce, which, as you probably know, is mostly made of salt. So in about 1 tablespoon of soy sauce, how much salt do we think is there? So it's actually already half a teaspoon of salt. So if you were to eat 2 tablespoons, which when you're cooking, you might very well add 2 tablespoons of soy sauce and not think anything of it, you're going to end up already at your maximum daily amount of salt. And so I think even though most of us probably aren't adding a lot of salt when we cook, we're adding other things that contain a lot of salt. And just being mindful of that, you can start using less. There's also versions of soy sauce that have less sodium, and that can be great too because they taste just as good, but they have less salt. And so you won't get to your limit for the day. All right, we'll do 1 more for salt. So this is a bag of chips. I think they're steak flavored. And so in 1 bag of chips, how many teaspoons of salt do we think there are? Just in a regular bag. So it's actually half a teaspoon. So similar to the soy sauce, if you eat 2 bags of chips, that's it for the day. And the cup of soup can be even worse. There can be tons of salt in those. So I'd really encourage you guys as you go throughout your day today to take a look at that nutrition label and see how much salt is really in some of these things. Because they may not seem very salty, but they have a lot hiding in there. All right. So now for our last tip, it's just to drink more water. I think we're all working hard in Singapore and it's very hot and we sweat a lot and you may feel like you want to pass out by the end of the day or faint. And that's because we're just not drinking enough water. You should really have at least 6 glasses a day. So like a nice size glass. And then if you're exercising, you should drink even more than that. Or if you feel like you're sweating, maybe it's a really hot day, drink even more water. And a big tip is that, 1, you shouldn't ever feel thirsty. So if you feel thirsty, it's probably already too late. You should be drinking lots of water so you're never feeling thirsty. And another fun one is that your urine, or when you pass water, it should not be the color that I'm using on these slides. It should not look that yellow. It should be pretty clear. And if it's not, you should drink more water. Also, caffeine and alcohol and some of the things that we may drink for fun make us pass more water. So we want to be sure that we're drinking, for every cup of coffee or kopi, we're drinking an extra glass of water because those things can make you pass water when you want to be able to keep it in your body. Okay, so review time. Thinking back to the very beginning of this talk, let's think of 3 or more problems that can come from having a bad diet. So maybe think of them in your head or write them in the chat. I'll give you a couple minutes to think of them. Yeah, I see someone coming through the chat. Perfect. So I'm seeing some obesity, heart failure, diabetes. Yep, it can cause problems with your liver, it can cause joint pain, it can cause stroke. Yeah, so we could really, there's lots of problems that can come from it. Awesome, you guys are giving great suggestions in the chat. Okay, so now let's talk about special diets because most of these tips are for young, healthy adults like all of us. So there are a few people that we want to be really careful of. In general, I will say the 6 tips are good across the board. If you remember nothing else, it's those 6 tips. But if you're really trying to go that little bit extra, let's talk about some special diets. So first, kids. Kids can eat everything we can. And for the most part, they have the same nutritional needs that we do. But with kids, it's important to be a role model. So kids are always trying to do what you're doing. And whoever is their primary caretaker, it may be you, it may be their parents, they're going to eat what you eat. So if they see you eating cup of noodles every day, they're going to want a cup of noodles. And so it's important to show them that eating lots of different foods are cool, and that that's just what adults do, is we eat lots of different foods. The next thing is, I know some kids are super picky and they will never eat a vegetable. Well, the good news is a lot of foods in Singapore and in other countries are fortified. So that means something like regular rice or something like pasta has extra nutrients put into it so that kids can get what they need, even if they're not really eating their vegetables. So if you have a picky eater who's refusing any sort of vegetables, any sort of fruit, make sure you're buying fortified foods so that they can get all the nutrients that they need. And then the next part is add some calcium. So kids really need calcium for their bones and for their brain development. And so even just one glass of milk or a soy milk that has calcium in it is great, and that will get them all the calcium they need. Now, another population that we may care for are the elderly. So in general, the elderly just need to eat a little bit less. They're not as active, they spend more time at home. And so a problem can be, as people get older, they want to keep eating the same amounts, and then they start to gain weight, which can be especially bad for older people. So really, you just want to lower the calories a little bit. It doesn't have to be dramatic, just enough so that they're not gaining weight. So just a little bit here, a little bit there, making their portions slightly smaller so that they're not eating so much food. And with that, since they're not eating as much, you want to be sure that what they are eating is really high quality. So when you choose protein for them, rather than doing like beef or lamb or red meat that has less nutrients and more fat, you want to pick something like fish or eggs that's really high in nutrients, even with less calories and less size. And older adults really need calcium. And the Singapore Ministry of Health actually recommends adding 2 glasses of milk or soy milk with calcium for older adults each day. So a little bit more calcium than the kids. Now for diabetics, the big thing here is the carbohydrates. So like I said, when you eat white foods, they almost instantly turn into sugar when they get into your blood. So even though this doesn't look like sugar and it doesn't taste as good as sugar, it ends up like sugar. So for people that have diabetes, you really want to substitute any of the white foods for brown foods. So brown rice instead of white rice, any sort of flour-based product. You can use wholemeal flour or a brown whole wheat flour, and that can be really good for helping keep their blood sugar low. Also, sugar substitutes are really good for diabetics. So there's lots of different types of them, and for almost everyone, they're very safe. So there's some that are better for baking, some that are better for cooking. You just need to look at the box and start to substitute some of those sugars so they're not getting so much of this in their diet. And then the last one is just to add more whole grains. So things like, again, brown rice, any sort of whole wheat flour product is going to be really good for them to get the nutrients they need without having so much sugar in their blood. And then finally, how do we cook for people that have high blood pressure? Obviously, we want to be really careful of salt. So anyone that has blood pressure or heart problems, their bodies get very sensitive to salt. Now, there are a lot of products that say no salt. So when you go to buy something like soy sauce, you can get a no salt or a lower salt version. When you're cooking, you can be really careful not to add salt. But also, it's even more important for people that have heart or blood troubles to switch to good fats. So things like vegetable oil or an olive oil, as opposed to a butter or a coconut oil or one of those fatty oils that can be worse for the heart. And like everyone else, they need more whole grains. So this is another group that you want to give more brown rice, more whole oats, whole wheat flour for this population as well. Okay, so review time. So we're going to go back a few bits to the 6 tips for healthy eating. So you might have them on your handout. So kind of say them in your head or type them or think them. So number 1, eat lots of different foods. Number 2, eat more fruits and vegetables. Number 3, switch bad fats for good fats. Number 4, eat less sugar. Number 5, eat less salt. And number 6, drink more water. All right. We have one last activity, and that's just reading nutrition labels. And I hope if you have something handy that has a nutrition label on it, like maybe you're drinking a drink, you can grab it right now. Otherwise, later today, maybe go through and find just something that you cook with a lot or you eat a lot and just see if you can read the nutrition label. All right. So on the nutrition label, we'll start first with knowing your portions. Sorry, one second, my computer had a glitch. So knowing your portions, and this is where the food companies almost try to trick us, is they don't want us to think there's so much bad stuff. So this nutrition label came from a bottle of oil. So there are 133 servings in it. So a lot of servings for this bottle of oil. Now for something like this, it says there's 2 servings. And I mean, I don't know who's going to drink half of this and then save half for later. You're probably going to drink the whole thing. But that means that when you look at the nutrition label, you have to double how much is in here because it's not, the serving is only this much. So next we want to look at the calories, or sometimes it's called energy. And the calories just tell you how much is in there. I think honestly, calories are not that useful. People love to talk about the calories and eat low calorie food. I think what it is so much more important than how many calories. For instance, this Milo doesn't have a lot of calories, but most of them are from sugar. So I don't really want people drinking Milo that has a lot of sugar in it. Versus maybe something like chicken has quite a few calories, but chicken's really good for you, so that's okay. So I wouldn't worry too much about the calories, but it might be something to look at. The next part is good fat or bad. So if we remember the unsaturated fat, so the ones that have the really long words, that tends to be the good fat. And then the trans fat or the saturated fat is the bad. Now, to be honest, there's no great level of either one of these things. It's not like I have a cutoff that, oh, if that's more than 3 grams of saturated fat, I'm not going to eat it. That's not how life works. But you might use this when you're picking between 2 products. So maybe you have a cooking oil and one of them has a lot more saturated fat. You can pick the other one. And then the next thing to look at is the carbohydrates, or sometimes it will be carbs and then it will have sugar underneath it. And that's really going back to what we talked about before, which is limiting how much sugar you're eating. So aiming for no more than 10 teaspoons a day. And then finally, the protein. So because this was a cooking oil, it had no protein in it, which is fine. But especially for older adults and kids, when you're really trying to get as many nutrients as possible, you want to look for things that have high protein. And then finally, the sodium or the salt. And again, we want to eat less of this. So just being mindful and paying attention to how much salt is in each product. Okay. So I think we're good on time. So now we'll open it up. I saw some questions come through.
Yeah, let me recap some of the questions. So there were lots of questions around the brown rice and the vegetables. So one comment was about that half a plate of rice or any rice is not enough. They need energy for work. So how can we eat more vegetables and still feel full?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think obviously how much you should eat of something is about how you're working. So if you're working all day and you're still very hungry, you can probably eat more. So some of this is guided maybe to people that sit and don't spend their whole day cooking and cleaning and running after kids. So always you should eat until you feel full. You shouldn't be hungry all day. But then certain vegetables will make you feel more full than others. So brinjal is really good, or eggplant. Some of the other ones like spinach, you can cook down and that will make you feel really full. So eating any of those vegetables can certainly help, but I don't want anyone going hungry. If you need to eat white rice or even brown rice, eat what you need to.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Actually, I have a bunch of questions here. Okay, there's so much advice floating around what to eat and not to eat.
Mm-hmm.
It can be hard to sieve out the truth. Now, my question is, a vegetarian diet is an automatically helpful one?
Mm-hmm. So vegetarian diet, we were actually talking about this before the call because I'm switching to vegetarian just because a lot of environmental reasons. Vegetarian can be really helpful. You're obviously eating lots of vegetables, but it's not automatically more healthy because some vegetarians end up eating a lot of breads or a lot of high carbohydrate products, a lot of rice, and that's not necessarily better. So I'm actually going to go back a little bit to the Singapore government's My Plate. So I think what happens is when people go vegetarian, they still eat the half vegetables. So they still eat that half of their plate as vegetables. But then this part that's supposed to be meat, they just fill it with more rice. And that's not good either. So you want to be sure that you're eating some sort of protein as a vegetarian, whether that's tofu or tempeh. Tempeh is fantastic for you. Or even just extra vegetables, making sure that you're getting some protein and not just eating the carbohydrates.
So you're saying that it's not recommended for everyone.
Yep, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you, but in general, it's not healthy for everyone.
Okay. Can I have another one?
Okay.
Okay, since you mentioned earlier about the sugar, artificial sweeteners give food a sweet taste without extra calories, right? But they might say that it is not all good for you. Why? Can you enlighten us?
Yeah, that's a great question. So she's basically asking that some sweeteners, it doesn't have calories, but then health guidance or the Ministry of Health will say, well, don't eat too much of that because that's not good for you either. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that sweeteners are synthetic, so they're made in the lab. And so there's concerns that if you eat too much of any of that maybe that could lead to cancer, which has not really been proven, or it could lead to some other problems. In general, they are very safe. None of that has been proven to be true. But like anything, I would not eat too much of it. So people sometimes switch from regular Coke to Diet Coke, which is great. It's a great change. But then they drink 20 Diet Cokes each day. And that much of a fake sweetener is probably also not good for you. There was one study, I think, that was decently good that showed that you could get more belly fat from eating the fake sweeteners. But again, no one really knows why that is. And there's just
so there will be an effect of our change of perception.
Yes. Yeah. So sometimes the fake sweeteners are so sweet that then if you eat something with sugar, it's not as sweet. Yeah,
you say that we're grieving more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
Sorry, I have a question. What food is good for the people have the problem with the liver exam? Thank you.
With the liver. So liver in general, the liver exam. Trying to think. In general, people with liver troubles, the 6 tips are still what you want to be eating. There are some issues that the liver is really bad at the end, but then you would need medications more than you would need a different diet. So I think for people with the liver, still continuing to eat those 6 tips.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have a question.
Sorry, you go first.
Okay, I go first. Thank you, Kelly. Doctor tell me my body is need more sugar. So when I feel like very weak and my hand shaking, so I make a tea with 3 spoons of sugar, and I don't like snack or cookie or what is it fruits. So I like to drink green tea, and then when I feel something I need sugar, I make a tea with 3 spoons of sugar. So my question is you have something to what food better for me to keep my body is something I really very big. I need sugar. I need sweet. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I think what's happening for you is probably that your body is just so low on nutrients that you need sugar, which sugar works very quickly. So if you were to eat something like a piece of chicken that doesn't have much sugar, it would take maybe an hour or so before you would start to feel the nutrients from that, versus sugar is just instant. That's why kids start going so crazy. And so I think what your doctor is trying to say, if you're shaky, you have low blood sugar, which I'm sure some of us have all felt because we, maybe skipped a meal and you start shaky. So eating pure sugar, like you put in your tea, will make you feel instantly better. I think what's probably better in the long run, the point where you're shaky, and eating more protein, eating whole grains, so something like brown rice, things that will make you feel more full and at more regular intervals, so you don't get to that point. Now, if you are shaky, the tea and the sugar, I think it's fine. I wouldn't maybe do it every day, but I understand that sometimes you can't eat and you are skipping meals and you have to do what you need to do. I certainly don't want you to pass out. So if you need to drink the tea with the sugar, then that's okay, if that's what works for you.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Question. My question is what we mentioned earlier, that food is really good for our body. But for a diabetic person, there is any specific fruits that they can have it because that is a high sugar. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, I think I'd have to look up exactly which fruits. I would encourage you to look at the handout. There was a button you could click to go to the Singapore Ministry of Health on diabetes, and they have like a very big list and lots more information on exactly which fruits. Off the top of my head, fruits that are really high in sugar are things like oranges, apples, honestly, bananas are very high in carbohydrates. Like I said, any white food turns to sugar. So those are some pretty high sugary ones.
Thank you.
No problem.
Question.
Question. How much egg we eat a day?
That's a great question. So eggs kind of get a bad reputation that I don't think is deserved. Eggs tend to have quite a bit of cholesterol, but to be honest, cholesterol, when you eat it, isn't always turned into cholesterol in your blood. Most of the cholesterol in your blood comes from saturated fat or the bad fats. And so eggs, I think if you're eating 2-3 eggs a day, I probably wouldn't eat more than maybe 5, but certainly you can have several eggs each day and be totally fine.
So how many eggs you recommended for healthy?
For healthy, probably 2 eggs a day is good.
2 eggs a day. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So can we eat the egg in one meal?
I have a question.
I just to follow up the question. Basically, our eating pattern is we eat tiny protein in a breakfast, one more in a lunch, and more protein in dinner. So is it okay if we eat our protein in one meal?
Yes.
Like what you say, like 2 eggs in a day. Then
Yes.
I will eat in the morning for 2 eggs. Is it okay?
Yes, especially if you're eating your protein in the morning, because that's going to help you feel full all day and not get shaky from the low blood sugar. So eating protein earlier is probably going to help you feel more full, especially if you eat a much later lunch or don't get to eat lunch because you're just too busy. Having eggs for breakfast is great.
a question. Hello.
Hello.
Teacher, I have a question. Yeah. Every morning and afternoon, I drink coffee. Is coffee good or bad for health? It's only 2 times because in the morning when I drink coffee, when I don't drink coffee, I mean, I feel dizzy and I feel lazy and I feel like my body is not so that energetic. And the
Yep.
same thing in the afternoon. So what can I do?
Yeah, so I think coffee is just fine. I drink a lot of coffee. And there actually have been some studies that they looked into coffee and it prevented certain cancers, which everyone in the medical community is kind of like weird. But they haven't found anything bad with the coffee itself. Now, that being said, it depends on how you drink your coffee. So if you're drinking Kopi with the 3 teaspoons of sugar twice a day, that might be a lot of sugar. Or sometimes those 3-in-1 packets have a lot of sugar. So I would recommend if you're using the 3-in-1 to switch instead to doing just an instant coffee and then adding your own sugar. So at least you can add less and kind of know how much sugar you're eating.
We're using the bag, coffee bag.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's okay. 2 times I drink a day. It's okay. It's fine.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
I have a question. Yeah,
okay.
It's about it's because I have a problem of creatinine. My creatinine is going up high if I eat more meat. So, what do you think is the best substitute to? I know tofu is nice, but then like the other more like to substitute protein.
Yeah, so she brought up the creatinine, which is a marker of the kidneys. And so some people can't eat as much meat because it makes the kidneys not work as well. And so I think tempeh is obviously great. I know that's a lot like tofu. Beans are very good. So black beans, or I think here they're sometimes called turtle beans. Lentils are great. And all of this you can find in most markets. And I just make them into soups. So you can take beans and cook them and then just crush them and cook them like meat. Or if you make like lentils, you can put them into any sort of soup, and that will give you a lot of protein and iron and things that are in meat without having to eat meat.
Okay. How about the rice? Is it okay if you eat more rice? Like brown rice?
Yeah. For you, I think if you're eating less meat, you can eat a little bit more rice, but just make sure that you're not substituting all of your meat with rice because it doesn't have very many nutrients.
Okay. How is there any vegetables that's not good for like having a high creatinine?
None that I know of, and I'd have to look it up. So I can look that up after and maybe send it out to Cece.
Okay.
Because I'm not certain on that one.
All right. Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question.
Okay. Your turn. Your turn. I'll be next.
Is it
okay?
Yes, Rublin, go ahead.
No. So my question.
okay? I have a question. Is it okay to eat potato?
Yes, Rublin, go ahead.
Is it okay to eat more potato and sweet potato? Is it good to our body?
Sweet potato?
Sweet potato and also the potato?
Yeah, so potatoes are just like any other foods where the ones with a different color that isn't white is probably better. So sweet potatoes have more nutrients than a regular potato. Regular potatoes are very starchy. They're white foods, so they tend to just provide more sugar when it goes into your blood. Sweet potato will at least provide a lot more nutrients. So I eat a lot of sweet potato as well as a meat substitute. I think they're great. And white potatoes aren't terrible, but treat them like white rice.
Wow, it's great. Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question.
Okay.
In 2010, 18, I have the blood clot in my vein, right left leg. So until now I on medication. But what will I want to eat and what I can't eat?
Right. So I'm guessing you might be on a medication called warfarin or Coumadin. And that's some of the blood clot medications are very tricky with how much is in the blood. And some foods you eat can make too much or too little. That I would have to look up because usually our dietitians do that. So if you're still on it, I would recommend talking to your doctor, or I can find a list and send that out as well. Because I don't remember off the top of my head what those foods are.
Yes, I see. Thank you.
No problem. Write that down.
I might share some questions from the chat so we don't skip those. So there were quite a few questions on milk. So perhaps you can answer a few of them. There was a question about, is pasteurized or non-pasteurized milk better? And what is the best type of milk to drink? So normal milk, pasteurized, not pasteurized, almond, soy, those sorts of questions.
Great. So yeah, when it comes to milk, generally pasteurized is going to be better. All pasteurized means is that it was heated enough that it could kill a lot of the harmful bacteria. Now, healthy adults can eat non-pasteurized things and it's fine. But for kids or perhaps pregnant women, those things that are not pasteurized can be much more dangerous. So I think if you have kids in the home or elderly people, you should definitely have pasteurized milk. And it certainly doesn't remove any of the nutrients by pasteurizing it. Now, in terms of what type of milk, so if you're buying cow's milk, if it's for little kids, like 1 year olds, usually you do a whole milk just because they need so much fat at that age. But as they get older, you should wean down to 1% or even skim milk to lower some of those saturated fats, because cow's milk actually has quite a bit of saturated fat. And then in terms of milk substitutes, it's really whatever you like. I like almond milk because I feel like almonds have the most nutrients. Soy milk is great too, though, or rice milk or oat milk. Any of them work. Just I would make sure that it has calcium, especially if you're drinking it or giving it to a kid or an older adult to give them calcium. Make sure they have calcium because some of the soy and almond milks don't. And then watch the sugar, because a lot of the soy and almond milk that I buy here, I drink it. I'm like, oh, this tastes extra delicious. And then I look and it has, 10 grams per 1 cup. So it has quite a bit of sugar in it. And you can certainly buy no sugar soy milk and no sugar almond milk, and they taste fine.
Great. Another question that came up was about nuts, and if nuts are good for you, and what type of nuts are good for you.
Yeah, so nuts are great for you. Something interesting about nuts is when you eat them whole, so if you eat a whole peanut, not all of it gets digested. So you could eat a handful of peanuts and you're only going to get calories from about half of them. Versus if you eat peanut butter or ground peanuts, you're going to get all the calories. And then peanut oil, you get absolutely all the calories. So eating whole nuts is great because you get a lot of nutrition, you feel full, and not all of it gets digested. In terms of which nuts, in general, almonds tend to be great. Peanuts tend to have more saturated fat and less nutrients. But I think any kind of mixed nut that you're eating during the day, especially for the people that were saying they get shaky if they skip a meal, just eating some nuts, even if it's not very many while you're working, can really help to prevent that shakiness.
Okay, I have a question now. You mentioned earlier about the superfoods. The question is, they are actually super? And question number 2, since they are expensive, is there any alternative food that we get the same quality of nutrients we get?
Yeah, that's a great question. So are superfoods actually super?
Are they really super?
Yeah, I will say for the most part, no. They have great marketing teams and great people trying to sell them. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with kale. kale got really popular as being this like super food, and it just made kale very expensive. And kale kind of tastes terrible when really spinach is just as good, much cheaper, and tastes better. So a lot of that is just branding and people trying to sell foods and good advertising. Now, some foods are obviously better than others, and I do think superfoods get a little bit of the hype, though. So if something seems extra expensive, it's probably not worth it. Some of the main superfoods I can think of are like really green vegetables. So things like kale. I would just eat spinach or broccoli instead. Something that's a similar color is probably going to have similar nutrients. For grains, so quinoa got really popular as being the super grain. It's so much better. Brown rice is almost as good as quinoa.
Quinoa is expensive, so what is alternative?
Yes, I would stick with brown rice.
Oh, brown.
Yeah, brown rice is almost as good and so much cheaper. So yeah, brown rice.
Okay,
no problem.
Kelly, I just need to jump in. We are
Yes.
running off on time, so maybe we can take 2 or 3 more questions, and then we can end the session.
Please answer from the chat, please.
Yeah, brilliant. I might do a few more questions that hopefully address a few that have come up from the chat. So there's a few questions around fruit and vegetables still. So for example, there was a question about potatoes better than rice as a carb source.
They're about the same. So I think a white potato is probably about the same as white rice. I'm not positive on this, but it seems that way. And then a sweet potato is going to be slightly better than brown rice just because it's got a lot more nutrients. But they're, again, going back to tip number 1 is eat lots of different foods and you'll be good. So maybe switch potatoes at one meal instead of rice, and that's fantastic to try some different things.
Awesome. There were also some questions around chili and if there's any benefits of eating chili or if spicy food is healthier.
Spicy food's great. I think the issue with spicy food is that it gives a lot of people indigestion, or gives you kind of the acid coming up. But if you don't have stomach problems from spicy food, I think it's fine. I'm not certain if it's good for you or bad for you. It's just a personal preference.
Cool. We also had a question about, is red or white meat better?
White meat is definitely better than red meat. So white meat being like chicken, fish, sometimes pork, has a lot more protein without having all the bad fats. So red meat, it looks delicious. It is delicious, but it's got a lot of bad fats in it. So I would try to limit red meat to maybe once a week, maybe twice a week, and really try to stick to fish and chicken instead.
Great. We had some questions about fruit. I think some were around diabetes as well, and if it's good to eat fruit before a meal, or if there's better time to eat it, like morning, noon, evening.
It's whenever you want to eat fruit. I think sticking to a breakfast or a morning meal that has more protein and less sugar is going to make you feel full and have more energy throughout the day. So just keeping in mind that some fruits have a lot of sugar and will give you kind of that sugar spike. So maybe don't eat, all of your fruit for breakfast, because that will make you kind of jittery by the rest of the day. But there's no perfect time. It's whenever you like.
Cool. We had a question as well about someone who was getting, I think, a bit of phlegm after drinking milk. Is there a reason for that?
Yeah, I don't think they really know why, but milk can kind of make you phlegmy sometimes. That's why singers don't drink milk very often. I'm not actually sure why. I think if it's bothersome, you can try switching to a soy milk or an almond milk or rice milk that probably won't have that problem after.
Great. Another question was around if organic foods are always healthier.
So organic, I want to say yes, because organic means it doesn't have a lot of the pesticides. The problem is that organic doesn't always mean anything when you see it. So there may not be anyone that's actually checking that it's organic, or that everything that went into it was actually organic. And so you're often paying money for something that may not actually be true. So I think if you have the money to spend and want to buy all organic, great. But if you don't, just make sure you're washing your fruits and vegetables with lots of water, and you'll get off of those pesticides.
Great. And then I think in the interest of time, ask one final question, which is quite relevant to today's day and age. So are there any foods you recommend us to make ourselves stronger and healthier in today's day and age when COVID-19?
Great question to end on. So fruits and veggies, and lots of different ones. So this is a time where we really want to make sure we're getting all of our nutrients. Vitamin C is great for your immune system, which comes in oranges, it can come in spinach, it can come in a lot of different fruits. And so making sure that you eat lots of variety. There's no one superfood that will prevent COVID, and even a great diet won't prevent COVID. But certainly eating a very balanced diet and lots of different things can help us stay safe. There's no one perfect food, which is good because you can pick what you like.
Fantastic. Well, I think that brings us to the end of today's presentation. Unless Kaylee, you have some slides you want to share?
No, I think Ruchita wanted to mention next week's. I'm going to end on just your homework. If you don't mind, I do have a QR code for a survey that will give me some feedback. And then if you would like, you can pick one of the 6 tips that we talked about and just try it this week. So maybe you want to try drinking more water, or maybe you want to try eating less sugar, maybe eating a breakfast food that's not so sugary, and see how you feel. That might be something good to start.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, so thanks everyone for attending today's session. I know I learned lots, and I hope everybody else did too. Next week, it is actually International Domestic Worker Day, and so I believe everyone should be receiving an invite to join next week's celebration, I think. So I'm not sure if someone's going to put it on the screen now or if it will be sent to you guys at a later date, but we hope to see you there as well.
So thank you so much, Elia. Thank you, Kelly, for today's session.
Thank you, Kelly and Elia. Thank you very much.
We would love to capture a picture of the speakers with everyone. So best smiles, please.
Get ready for the photo. Smile.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Maybe one more. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Ruchita, can you tell Kylie how many attendants participate?
Yes. So we had over 135 participants. In between, we had reached to 137. Then 2 people came in and logged out. So we had a very, very good engaging session is how I see it. There was a lot of interaction between you guys and the group over here. So thank you so much. Kelly, you've been amazing at the shelter. And now once again, you've been a huge, huge help to all of us. Thank you for being there today, both you and Elia too.
Yes. Thank you, Elia, for coming.
Thank you.
I would just flash in our International Domestic Workers Day invitation. We'd love to see all of you there. Elia, Kelly, you also please join in if you can. Okay, I'll share my screen. So can you all see?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So please, everybody do join in.
And for those who is having a rehearsal today at 4 o'clock, please come on time. Ruchita?
Yes, we are going to have our International Domestic Workers Day rehearsal today at 4 o'clock. So many of you are here in this session as well. Let's try and start the session on time and run through the program. And yeah, thank you everyone. Have a good evening. And anything else, CC, you want to add?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you for fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Miss Kelly.
They're very beautiful.